This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the back Zurhaar, he backs it, he kicks it, all the floor from Dees. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing, he keeps going, 4 bounces. Joining the chorus, the Can't Lose Kangas, AFLW premiers.
Hello and welcome back to a North Pod, and a bit of an unusual North Pod because we bloody won, and it wasn't close. It was a definitive win. The last time that we were this definitive in winning, with 20 minutes to go, we're home here, would have to be a long, long time ago. I think back to that Adelaide game in COVID, like in 2020. Maybe one of the Gold Coast wins, you could say, that last round a couple of years ago. We were pretty home and hosed in that last quarter, but this was something else. It was a special last quarter performance, made all the better given our first quarter was pretty shocking. So I guess a lot to get to in this episode, heaps to talk about, but hopefully for us long-suffering North fans, if you're listening to this, hopefully this can give you some joy, because there's been plenty of analytics, and there's still going to be plenty of that in this episode, but plenty of here's why things are okay, and plenty of here's what we need to do better. And I think hopefully we can just enjoy this episode because we won, and emphatically so. It was a really, really good team performance from the boys. So yeah, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Brew review time. Here we go. So team selection, I'll be honest, I was a little bit, miffed is not the right word, but surprised, bemused. I guess it wasn't quite what I was expecting. So we know Griffin Logue has the hamstring injury, so he was out. Jackson Archer suspended, which, look, I'm not going to get into that. I spoke a little bit about it last week. I just can't fathom that in our sport that's a reportable offence. So if you want to give a free kick, sure, I think you could argue it was his free kick, but anyway, that's come and gone. He's out for 2 more games, but baffling decision. So they're out. I'm thinking, great, this is going to be an opportunity to, let's blood some new young players, give them a couple of games experience whilst, those players are out of the side. Toby Pink is probably not what I had in mind. I thought this might be another opportunity to get some games into big shotty Will Dawson. Probably less so Whitlock. I think it's probably fair that he's, not quite ready yet. Totally fine. But I thought, we played Dawson for a few games last year. Let's get him in again. I understand he's had an interrupted preseason, so I think probably they're taking a conservative approach. But nonetheless, I probably didn't think or don't think that Toby Pink is our long-term future as one of our key tools. That being said, he probably does help us win now, so to speak, ahead of those two. Dill Stephens, whatever. He's on a longish term deal. I think it's important that he does, he gets some opportunity, because ultimately he's going to be around for a little bit yet, so we've got to see if we can turn him into something. So, look, I guess, I just wasn't stoked with those two as our ins. Similarly with the Dill Stephens, maybe this is an opportunity to play a Miller Bergman or Riley Hardiman. Again, someone who's a little bit younger and potentially more likely to be our future with some development. Would have been perfect to get Josh Goder in, obviously not quite ready from his injury. So, those ins, I guess, didn't excite me. I wasn't upset and angry. I thought it was maybe a missed opportunity. I put my hand up with the Toby Pink one. I was wrong about that. He was the right move, because he came in and was shaky in the first quarter, but had a really good impact in the second half. So I'll talk a bit about him. Darcy Tucker played the full game instead of being the sub. He came in and essentially replaced Jackson Archer off half-back with a little bit of wing time, but pretty much mostly half-back for Darcy Tucker. And that's how we lined up. Let's get to the game then. And North Melbourne, big winners. 19-11-125 defeated the Melbourne Demons 9-12-66. So a 59 point win, a 10-goal win to North. And yeah, like I said, we were home and hose with 20 minutes to go. After that burst at the start of the last quarter, it was all over. So let's just walk through the game and have a chat about some of those major points as the game went on. Because like I said off the top, it wasn't a good start. The scoreboard wasn't terrible. We were only down by a goal at quarter time, but the way that we started was, it was emblematic of how we've played for the last several years. We gifted them such easy goals. We actually were playing okay, except for these horrific turnovers and errors that we know have plagued us for the past 4 or 5 years. I'll walk you through them. Toby Pink gave away an insufficient intent free kick. The Melbourne player, I don't recall who it was off the top of my head, but just nailed it from the boundary, sort of 40 metres out. So I think in that instance, Pink probably just had to disguise a little better. It was borderline. It wasn't egregious, but I think he could have done better. Not long after, Toby Pink again takes a really nice intercept mark, only to pull a Charlie Comben, just kicks it inboard, turns it over. Needless inboard kick for a player of his skill set. Turns it over. Goal goes over the back of top of his head. Later in the quarter, LDU steps over the mark, gives away a 50-metre penalty. He was over the mark. It was marginal, but he was over the mark. I don't remember who it was now, but the Melbourne player got marched up the field, kicks a goal. And then another one really late in the quarter, Robert Hansen Jr. has it on the wing. He had the opportunity to essentially, take the ball out of bounds, get tackled over the line, or pretend to evade over the line, but didn't get the ball alive. He would have known exactly how long was left in the quarter. It's a turnover, heads up the other end. Bailey Fritsch takes a mark and kicks a goal after the siren in the first quarter. That there's 4 goals, and that was Melbourne's 4 goals in the first quarter. So all of them directly from pretty correctable mistakes by us. And I think how often has that happened over the past several years where we're playing pretty well, things are mostly going our way, and we gift goals. So outside of that, in the first quarter, our pressure was great. You could see that we came to play, as the old adage goes. But we were really corralling. We were tackling pretty well, I thought. Tommy Powell had a really blistering quarter and a fantastic first half, to be honest. Paul Curtis was looking really lively at ground level. And we did take advantage of some of those opportunities that we got. We were competing. We were only a goal down, and really we should have been all square at 23 apiece if we hadn't gifted them that last goal after the siren. So I think going into quarter time, I felt as though we've seen this story before. We've competed. We've let ourselves down with some mistakes, and then our heads drop and the opposition get on top. We've seen that so many times. I think subconsciously that's what I was expecting. I was pretty frustrated with the way that we conceded that last goal, because it would have just been so simple to run out the clock and go in all square. However, that's not what happened. The second quarter is a really interesting one, actually, because we took control. We kicked 5 goals to 2, so we took the lead. However, similarly, there was still some glaring errors in our game. Charlie Comben didn't do too much in the first quarter, but his second quarter was awful, to be honest. He dropped 2 or 3 marks that he absolutely should have taken. He was essentially uncontested because he was coming up as that extra player. Just having a howler of a quarter. Certainly one of them led directly to a goal, and Melbourne only kicked 2 in this quarter. You'd be forgiven for thinking that he was playing hurt and second-guessing himself. And look, maybe he is playing hurt because we saw him get injured last game, so hard to say how much of a recovery he's had from that incident, but yeah, he just looked like a shell of himself in this second quarter. There was certainly some people on social media saying that it's time to stop playing him in defence, which after his second quarter you could understand, but as we'll go on to find out, he had a much improved second half. But him aside, I think we were doing plenty right. We had some really good chase down tackles and bumps that led to goals. LDU, Larky, Powell, all leading the way, which was great to have that mix of senior and youth doing that. I mean, Tommy Powell is probably on the borderline of young now, to be honest. He's been in the side and in the system for long enough, but you want your players, you want your bigs and your smalls and your talls. You want any type of player providing that pressure, and you can see all sorts doing it. We had a couple of really nice chains from end to end where our handball game actually worked. I guess going back to the first quarter, there was just a lot of times where we tried to get it going and move the ball, with quick hands and carrying the ball up the ground and just got shut down, weren't quite able to get it going in that first quarter. We saw it start to come to fruition more often in the second quarter. Like I said, got those chains going, got that leapfrog where you get over the back of the opposition defence and all of a sudden you've got an outnumber because they keep pressing up. And oftentimes, we're not quite able to be clean enough to execute in those situations. But, I think once we got one of them done, it would almost like, okay, actually we can do it. And, we saw the belief grow from there. Paul Curtis nearly ruined one. He had a bit of a fumbly moment in one of those chains that nearly led to it stopping, but fortunately he was good enough to, we were good enough to recover it and make sure it got over the back. But it was those little moments in the second quarter that made you go, okay, like there is some belief here. We took the lead and went in essentially 2 goals up at half time. So unusual, but there's been plenty of games over the past several years that we've been close, slightly ahead, slightly behind at half time and well and truly in the game, and it's gotten away from us. So again, half time, I'm sitting there going, all right, we've played a good half. Let's wait and see in the Premiership third quarter, how do we throw this away? But again, we didn't. The third quarter was a little bit cagey. We did extend our lead slightly, got ourselves out to a 3-goal lead at 3-quarter time, but I think you could see the beginnings of stuff happening here. Toby Pink, I mentioned him off the top. He proved me wrong. He had some really nice big tackles to redeem himself from those first quarter mistakes that he made. I thought he was super important in the second half. But Chom is the one that we need to talk about. Completely different player, Charlie Comben. We'll talk a little bit more about him soon, but he was just intercepting for fun. Flying for the footy, contesting everything, and just using his body in fantastic, in really good defensive craft ways, which is something that we haven't seen him do in those first 6 quarters of the season. But I don't know if the flick switched. Oh, don't think that's the saying. I don't know if the switch flicked for him, if there was a bit of a coaching change at halftime, a bit of a discussion had, or if it just all clicked into place for him. Because he was a vastly different player in that third quarter, and to be honest, really, really stopped a lot of Melbourne's flurries forward. Essentially played that role that Jake Lever, tries to play for Melbourne, particularly when May's in the side. So, he was a real difference maker in the third quarter and continued to play well in the last, and was taking grabs that were far more difficult than the ones he was dropping in the second quarter. LDU was just scintillating from congestion. You could see what he was trying to create and the way that he just, he created space for himself. It was, Scott Pendlebury's a very different player, but Pendles has that ability to move slowly but still create space for himself. And we saw a bit of that from LDU. He wasn't necessarily absolutely bursting, but the way that he was able to change directions, he's got that great step. I thought he had, not a massively high numbers game, but a very good impact game for LDU. Fino Sullivan, a quieter game, but read Jake Bowie shank beautifully and intercepted in the middle of the ground to set up Zurhaar for a goal. It was kind of like the regular roles that we're used to watching were reversed. We had so much confidence and the opposition were just gifting us goals and we didn't stuff it up. We actually finished them off, which is, we are so used to seeing a North Melbourne side, give up easy goals and give up momentum. Whereas really that was what Melbourne was doing. I thought they'd have it in their forward line for long periods, not able to kick the goal, and it would go up the other end and we'd score an easy goal. So you could see the confidence building, you could see the belief happening, and all of a sudden, with each forward thrust, you could see the players kind of, I don't want to say trust, because I think they have trust, but they trusted a more implicit way in that they knew where we were going. They trusted that the next possession was going to be successful and therefore ran to the right spots. And I think, for me, that's something that we just haven't seen. We haven't seen players believing that the ball's going to get to them, because invariably in the past it hasn't. So going into 3-quarter time, we're 3 goals up and it's nerves. It's how are we going to blow this? What's going to go wrong? How can this possibly drop off a cliff? And thank goodness that our prayers were answered and we just kicked 3 goals straight out the gate to get out to a 36-point lead. 3 goals in 2.5 to 3 minutes. It was game over at that point. We won the ball out of the middle, and the Dees without May, we just put them to the sword. They didn't have the defensive options to shut us down, and like I said, we just kept winning it out of the middle in this last quarter. Xerri had a really, really good game against Max Gawn. I thought he definitely took the points in that battle, and as a result, our midfielders were getting great service. Powell was fantastic all day. He was phenomenal. I've mentioned LDU was really good in the second half. Sheasel didn't have a game that I think was going to feature in his highlight packages, but I thought in the last quarter he got enough of the footy and was smart enough with his disposal to make an impact. And we just saw they were able to get it forward effectively, give our forwards a chance, and we just saw our forwards, when they actually get an even opportunity and even numbers, were able to go to work. Robert Hansen Jr., I thought, had a really, really good last quarter. Larky got involved again and kicked 2 of those 3 to start the last quarter that sealed the game. He ended with 3 goals after kicking our first as well. And then we could just enjoy some of the most emphatic, confident, skillful football that us North Melbourne fans have got to watch, in the past 5 years, I thought. Whilst there were still moments where you look at it and go, all right, we weren't quite as clinical as you'd like. If we're going to be a good or elite side, it was just such a massive difference what that confidence can do. Because like I mentioned before, our players believed. And that's something that we haven't seen. That belief, I think, created more belief. And we saw players that, Robert Hansen Jr. is a great example. In the last 30 seconds or so of the game, he took on a couple of players in the wing, took a bounce, and just did some flashy stuff that, I just don't think that a player like him would be doing when we're under the pump and, the game hasn't gone well. He had the confidence to take it on, and I think that's what we want to see from players like him. Everything was just going so well for us. Even when LDU dropped a chest mark in the middle of the ground, that forced him to take the game on and actually gave us a deep entry, which resulted in a goal anyway. It was almost better off that he dropped it and created, a bit of a faster ball movement. So we were just fumbling our way into success. Nothing could go wrong for us really in the second half of this game. And there's not much more to say about that last quarter other than that. It's the best way that we've played, or the best quarter we've played in a while, I would say. You could look at that Collingwood game where we got out to a massive lead in the first half, but I think the fact that this was to clinch a game against a side that, is pretty loaded in the midfield. Viney, Petrarca, Gawn, Oliver, are all really good midfielders. They still had Lever in their defence. Jacob Van Rooyen's a dangerous option. This is a side that, unlike when Melbourne beat us in the pre-season, they've got much more of their best players in. So to beat them at Marvel Stadium, our first home game for the year, it was really a relaxing and enjoyable last quarter, to be honest. And I think watching it, I wondered if this is what it's kind of like for opposition teams to be playing us for the last 4 years. It was just... there was no doubt in my mind once we kicked those 3 goals to start the last quarter, and then we kicked another 3 shortly after that as well. So the monkey is off the back for the season. We've got win 1. And I guess, hopefully the confidence that this game breeds, leaks into the next couple of weeks because... you don't want this to be a one-hit wonder. We're not going to win every game this year. We're not going to win a premiership, but you do want to see more wins like this where you surprise a team. And, if we can win more games where it's not, last chance saloon winning it by 3 points, that would be absolutely fantastic. So 59-point winners, and as you can imagine, a fair bit to talk about in terms of the rest of the game. So let's get to the next part. Story of the game, and I think for me it's a pretty easy one. It's the start of that last quarter. I just spoke about it, but we just buried them at the start of the last quarter, and it was the fact that we won it out of the middle 3 times in a row and then kicked a goal 3 times in a row. It was, just beautiful to watch. Curtis kicked the first, Larky kicked the next two, but the forward line synergy was there. It was almost as if over the course of the game, that connection between our mids and our forwards was developing, and the last quarter it gelled, and you just saw we were unstoppable in the first half of that last quarter. We kicked 6 goals unanswered, and just were maniacal. I'd say, particularly in the middle. It wasn't that we were lucky the ball bounced our way. It was Xerri was winning it, and then Powell, LDU. Simkin a little bit as well. Sheasel were being effective by hands, getting someone free and then belting it long. It wasn't a quick kick. It was a kick to our forwards' advantage or a deep penetrating kick. So either way, you're getting a good result there because you're getting a contested marking situation or you're putting our players out in space. I thought over the day, our clearance work and our work around congestion was good. We certainly led the contested possession count by about 20 or so, and we won clearances 42-30 across the afternoon. It was really evident that our midfield, despite Clayton Oliver's best efforts, were having more of an impact, and for once that actually led to scoring opportunities for our forwards. We've seen time and time again that sometimes we're able to dominate in the midfield or certainly win the clearance battle, but not convert that to effective inside 50s and therefore scores. But it was a different side, a different showing in this instance. Xerri 12 clearances, Simkin 8, Powell 8, Sheasel 4, LDU 4. They were doing the power of work and the most damage in the midfield there. And you saw the maturity of that midfield finally getting some meterage and getting some advantage for our forwards. And that allowed Larky, Darling, Curtis, Robert Hansen Jr., like these types to get into dangerous positions. Zurhaar was a massive beneficiary, kicked 4 goals and really looked like he was taking advantage of the less attention going his way, I suppose. So, yeah, I think if we're looking for a big moment, it has to be the start of that last quarter. The fact that we just blew them out of the water and ruined whatever plans they had to get back into the game because, a 3-goal margin is nice, but it's very easy to run down a 3-goal margin in 30 minutes of football. So the fact that we made that a 36-point margin and then blew it out to 54 not long after that, I think really was fantastic to see and just... Like I said, so unfamiliar. I almost don't know how to talk about it because normally I'm looking for all the ways that we can be better, but the first half of that last quarter, I don't think we could play any better than that. The way that we are at the moment, it was great footy, and you could see the confidence just continue to breed confidence. I know I keep saying that, but I think a great example of that was Bailey Scott's goal in the last quarter. It was one of the later ones, so not in that early burst, but he took a mark and just immediately wheeled onto his boot and smashed it through from about 50. And it's that kind of confidence that we just don't normally have. He would have had the slow play. He would have looked for the percentage kick at the top of the square. It would have got punched through for a point, and then the opposition would have waltzed through our defensive zone. We've seen that plenty, and it didn't happen. He took the mark. He backed himself, and he's a decent kick for goal, Bailey Scott, and punished it through. So that, I think, has to be the story of the game. That midfield effort at the start of the last quarter really decided the game and put it out of arm's reach for the Dees. And yeah, I just love to see more of that throughout the rest of this season because it was super exciting. Shinboner of the week it's an interesting one this week. Last week it was Jake Constanti. He had some fantastic tackling and pressure, and I thought, in a similar vein, Chom did not have a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. His first half, and in particular his second quarter, was not good. But I think the fact that he had such a massive turnaround in the second half makes him fully deserving of the award. 12 marks, 5 of them contested, 12 intercepts, 3 spoils. That tells a story. He had about 16 disposals, I think. But it was the impact in that third and fourth quarter, particularly the third. He was fantastic in the third when Melbourne were getting a bit of run on. He stopped all of those with his 12 intercepts and 5 contested marks. Like I mentioned earlier, just read the ball beautifully, played a great physical aerial game and didn't muck around with his disposal like he's been prone to doing. It was long kicks to safe options. He made his decisions quickly, but he didn't, overthink it. And, whether or not he's a long-term defender or not, I think is probably irrelevant when he's marking it like that. He can play the third tall. And sure, there's an argument that Melbourne's forward line probably allows him to do that a little bit. They don't necessarily have massive tools there that are going to, monster our tools and therefore make it hard for Chom to be that third defender. But you can only play who you're coming up against. And I thought, just a massive turnaround of form for him within this game. So would love to know if there was some conversations at halftime or if it was just him, a bit of self-belief and backing himself. But he came out a different player in that second half. And, I take my hat off to him because that would be really hard to do. It would be very easy to beat up on yourself and, not give up, but drop your head after that first half. And he didn't. He had a fantastic, super impactful third quarter and finished off in the last. So Charlie Comben is definitely deserving of the Shinboner of the week. If we toddle on over to the North Podium voting, I'm just going to recap this because there's plenty of players in the votes this week. Little bit of a different system this year. Essentially, it's still 4-3-2-1, but anyone can get any number of votes. I could, in theory, give every player a vote if I deem them worthy. 4 is essentially a game-winning best-on-ground performance. 3 is played a really good game. 2 is played a good game. And then 1 is either, played your role without too much to talk about or had some highlights or, maybe some good and some bad in your game. So that's the gist. It's a feel thing for me, and I guess the consistency is that it's always me giving the votes. So for the first time this year, I am giving out a 4 votes, and that has to go to Tommy Powell. Quietened down a little bit in the second half, but his first half was phenomenal. Finished with 31 disposals, a goal, 8 clearances, 535 metres gained, 7 inside 50s, a couple of goal assists, went at 84% disposal effectiveness. And when the others were just getting going in the first half, he was elite. He was a great outside player, was good on the inside as well. His stoppage work was, I think, the best that I've seen from him. He wasn't rushed, he sidestepped, he created his own pace. Space, I should say, but he created his own pace as well. Just a phenomenal game from Tommy Powell. I think showed that he's not just going to be sort of a third or fourth fiddle midfielder. He's not happy with that. He was unstoppable in the first half. And then the second half, he slowed down a little bit. I think some others, picked up the slack. It wasn't necessarily that he played poorly. It just meant that others were, doing their part. Like LDU, I think, played better in the second half. Sheasel similar. I thought Sheasel's last quarter was the best of the quarters that he played. But, if I was picking best on ground and the player that, I guess, kept us in it in that first quarter and really got us ahead in that second quarter, it's Tommy Powell. For me, he was the best player on the ground by far, to be honest, because his 31 disposals were all impactful. His clearance work, like I said, amazing. And a lot of meters gained. A lot of those clearances were sort of 60-meter kicks that were going deep inside 50. So, a fantastic game from Tommy Powell. Definitely deserving of the four votes and the first player to get the 4 votes for this year. I've got 2 players collecting the 3 votes. LDU is the first of those. I thought he played a fantastic game. 23 disposals, 7 tackles, 4 clearances, 2 goal assists, 87% disposal effectiveness, and 23 pressure acts. And I think that's what I want to speak to. It was one of the best defensive efforts that I've seen from him. His 2-way running was fantastic. I mentioned he had a chase down, tackle/bump. He was just a difference maker at every contest, and we know he's smooth. We know that he, can create his own space through his burst of speed, but I thought the way that he actually did that in this game, and he did lower his eyes as well. He wasn't always just kicking and hoping. It was a fantastic LDU game. Not as high in the numbers again, that 23, you look at that and you go, okay, he wasn't accumulating, but the vast majority of those disposals were super effective, were really effective disposals. So, yeah, another game that you look at LDU and you go, gosh, let's sign this guy, and hopefully some more wins like this, and he'll be convinced and he does sign. That I think is what everyone at North Melbourne HQ would be hoping, because he is a difference maker in that midfield. We know that, we have known that, but he just gave us another reminder of that against the Dees. He was phenomenal. The other player I'm giving the 3 votes is Paul Curtis. 22 disposals, 3 goals, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 2 of those inside 50, had a goal, assist, 11 score involvements. And I mentioned him in the game review. He just looked lively all game. He was doing it both ways. A target in the air. He was really good at ground level with his crumbing. His tackle and pressure was really good. For me, it was the best that he's looked this season. We saw him have that cameo in the last quarter last week, and it seemed as though he just took that into into this game. I know it's only game 2, but his preseason wasn't great, wasn't amazing. I thought we saw him back to his best in this game. Could have had 4 or 5 goals really, but like I said, 3 goals. His tackling pressure was phenomenal, and I thought, super, super promising game from Oily Paul. If you've been around for a while, that's what I was calling him last year. He just loves to slather that oil on, does Oily Paul, and it works for him. Then we'll go to the 2 votes. I'll try to whip through the 2 and the 1s a bit quicker because there are a few. So the 2 votes, Caleb Daniel, 31 disposals, 7 marks, 778 metres gained. That is a crazy, crazy number. He did exactly what we brought him in for. He was caught holding the ball once, but aside from that, he had some really good release kicking and got the ball moving for us all afternoon. Tristan Xerri, I mentioned him. I definitely thought that he won the battle with Max Gawn. 20 disposals, kicked a goal, had a really nice contested mark essentially in the goal square to kick that goal. 29 hitouts, 12 of those to advantage, and 12 clearances. So, a really nice, mighty tussle with Gawn, but definitely beat him and looked to physically impose himself at every opportunity. You could certainly mount an argument that he was mad at not getting the All-Australian jacket last year. I thought, he definitely beat Gawn and had a good game. Cam Zurhaar, I mentioned earlier, 4 goals, 17 disposals, 3 marks, 4 inside 50s, 11 score involvements, and finally was able to turn his possessions into some goals. Last week he was inaccurate. He was, around the mark, but wasn't quite able to finish his work and was a bit fumbly. I thought in this game, fantastic. Kicked his goals, was definitely the beneficiary of May being out and a lot of that attention going to Larkey and Darling. But whilst a lot of his goals weren't necessarily tricky ones to finish off, he's got to find himself in the right spot. I mentioned Chom earlier. I've also given him 2 votes. I just, I couldn't give him 3 or 4 given the first half that he had. He had a shocking first half, but I think holistically had a good game, so certainly give him the 2 votes. And then Luke McDonald is another one. He absolutely blanketed Bailey Fritsch. Collected 15 disposals and 6 marks for himself, but Fritsch kicked a goal. I mentioned earlier, he kicked that goal at the end of the first quarter, but 5 disposals for the day. So you can say what you want about Luke McDonald and whether or not he's up to it, but he was on today. He's all heart and absolutely blanketed Bailey Fritsch, and he is such a dangerous player. We saw Jackson Archer get him last time we played Melbourne and also shut him down. McDonald this time, and I thought, easy to overlook him. He's not going to jump out in the stats sheet, but he played a really good defensive game. And then 1 vote, Nick Larkey kicked 3 goals. I think you've got to get some reward for that, although he did drift in and out of the game. Jack Tarling, 300th game, kicked the 2 goals and was definitely important structurally. Colby McKercher, I thought, had some flashes of brilliance on the wing and probably deserved a vote. Aidan Core, primarily on Van Rooyen, who kicked a goal and had 9 touches, but similar to Darling, I think probably played his role without too much flash. Robert Hansen Jr. is probably the opposite of that, though. Moments of flashiness in his 15 disposals, 2 goal assist performance. A really nice kick inside 50. He's still one of our best in the team for that. But, like a few of the other 1 voters, was in and out of the game. Toby Pink, 2 massive tackles. I thought, his efforts in that third quarter, sort of proving me wrong and for not wanting him selected earlier in the week. I thought that was worth a vote. Luke Parker, I haven't mentioned as another one of those mids. 1 goal, 22 disposals. I thought just made the right choice every time that he got it, so worth a vote. Jai Simpkin, very similar to Luke Parker, 1 goal, 24 touches, and had some really nice moments, but probably drifted in and out a little bit too much with his impact to vote higher. And then the last one vote, Harry Sheasel, 28 touches, 8 score involvements, but probably not his cleanest performance. Last week was a bit the same. He wasn't at his best, and he wasn't at his best either in this one. He had a pretty uncharacteristic turnover, looked a little fumbly a couple of times, but the last quarter, I thought, he sort of stepped up and was really good at getting out of the middle in that last quarter. So got himself up into the votes from that. But I think he's a watch because he has not been as clean and dominant as we've seen him over the past couple of years. Hopefully North Melbourne's not rubbing off on him too much. So there is all of the North Podium votes from this game. As you can see, quite a bit to unpack there. We'll see how we go in the future. I might just, whip through the 2s and 1s a bit quicker in the interest of not getting bogged down in this segment. But look, we'll see how it feels in the edit. We'll see how we go. In terms of the standings after just 2 games, so early days, but Tommy Powell is out in the lead on 6 votes, courtesy of the 4 that he collected from this game. Then we've got a couple of 3-way ties. So LDU, Larky, and Curtis are on 4 in equal second, and Xerri, Darling, and Sheasel equal third on 3 votes. So we'll see that spread out as the season, stretches out. Plenty of time there to extend that. But Tommy Powell, another fast start. He started fast last year, and he's done it again this year, and good on him. Right about now, you'd be an excited North Melbourne supporter, and so am I. So show your excitement, please, by helping me support the show, sharing the show with any North Melbourne fans that you know. Subscribe on your chosen podcast service, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever app you listen. Get involved on my social accounts, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, etc. at NorthPod Show or at NorthPod. And you can also support me on my Buy Me a Coffee link. I'm not a coffee drinker. I prefer a Coke. So that's how I'll be spending that money. But you can find the link for that in the show notes. I would like to thank Adrian Marinaro for the coffees that he shouted me during the week. I really appreciate that, Adrian. And if you'd like to get yourself a shout out, you can follow the link in the show notes to support me in that way as well. Kanga clipboard time. This is where we go through whatever else is worth unpacking from the game. I think off the top, the ball movement really matched what we needed in this game. We saw fast, precise ball movement off turnover where, there's going to be opportunities to move the ball quickly. And when it wasn't that, it was slow and methodical, particularly from defensive 50 if we're kicking out. Or if it was a slow turnover where it's a free kick and a stoppage in play. Several times we switched successfully twice, with some quick precision kicking that got us to the other side of the ground and allowed ourselves the opportunity to take up some space and actually penetrate and create. So I think for me, it was that perfect example of where we picked the way that we wanted to play based on what the game was giving us. We weren't forcing the quick plays. You could probably argue maybe in the first quarter we were a little bit. We were forcing and it wasn't quite working. We weren't able to get ourselves quite in the right positions to link up successfully. But certainly after that, I thought the way that we moved it with by hand and by foot and just carrying the footy was super impressive. It was confident. I know I've mentioned that word confidence a lot of times in the podcast, but it was just a really confident display, which is, not something that we've seen from North Melbourne sides in the last little while. So really promising to see that, the way that we moved the ball was, I think Clarko would be stoked with that because, it's what he's been trying to ingrain in us over the past couple of seasons. You have to teach them how to play a certain style, but it's much harder to teach them when to play that way. And I think we saw that balance was perfect in this game from quarter time onwards. Nothing forced, just matched what the game needed from us. You could even argue when the game was done in the last quarter and we were just playing it out. We did create more stoppages. We slowed the game down a little bit because we certainly didn't want it to let Melbourne get a run on. So that was really promising. I think Fino Sullivan's one that I haven't spoken about a lot. Was low numbers, probably 10 odd possessions. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but just showed more of the brilliance that we're going to get to see from him. Several times ran back with the flight of the ball to make a contest. Didn't mark it either time, but created a contest and didn't allow Melbourne an easy mark and the capacity to therefore launch back inside their 50. I think it's going to be super exciting when we do get to move him up the field. He's certainly not quite in the style of, say, Sheasel and McKercher off half-back where he's constantly, the ball's always going through him. He's not that kind of player. I think as he moves further up the ground, we're going to see more of his flair. Like we saw in the back pocket, and I think it was in the last quarter, he had a beautiful blind turn to get himself out of trouble, and that's what I saw from him in his underage stuff as well. He's got some really good congested footy moves. He knows how to create space for himself, and he's not rushed. So we saw that from him. I think he's going to be a really, really good player in the future as he develops, which, we probably knew given that he is a number 2 draft pick, but it's nice to see glimpses of it at AFL level. It's nice to be reassured that you likely haven't got a dud with the number 2 pick. So that was super promising. And then I've got a couple of questions here. I think a big question for me is whether or not we can translate this confidence and flow into future games. I mentioned that earlier on, that it's going to be super important that this isn't just a one and done thing. We need to build this and try and create some kind of contagious, is there a way that we can absolutely just let's play? If we could play Adelaide tomorrow, I'd say let's do it, because we'd be running on top of the ground. We'd be feeling so confident and happy with ourselves, and so we should. So it's, I guess, around when the game is reviewed, I really hope there's a strong focus on what we did that worked. What were the things that created these situations where we were able to get over the back of Melbourne's defence, where we were able to find the right options by foot? What worked really well for us at stoppage and in stoppage situations, because all of that, you just want to keep going. You want to keep that shakiness that we've seen in previous years and previous matches. You want to keep that away. And same with the second guessing. I think a lot of the mistakes that we historically make are from our inability to be decisive and take the first option. So I think if we can just continue that last quarter into next week, even if it diminishes a little bit, you want to see, that confidence and the players moving to the right spots. You want to see that continue as seamlessly as possible. So I do hope that the review allows them to do that and celebrates and highlights the things that went well. Even someone like Luke McDonald in his game, there'd be some fantastic footage of him and the way that he positioned himself and didn't allow Fritsch, opportunities to run and jump at the footy. Because Melbourne did have plenty of inside 50s. I think they actually had a couple more inside 50s than us. So it wasn't that the ball wasn't going in there. It was just, it was pretty dirty ball at times, and it was certainly really well defended by our defensive group. So let's see. That's definitely a question mark as to whether or not we can translate that, but you certainly hope so. The other question mark, I think, for me is around our midfield rotation. Wilfield was subbed again, this time for Dill Stevens, who, he came on and he was fine. He had 5 or 6 touches, but, I've always said he's just going to be a player that I don't think he's ever going to excite us, Dylan Stevens. He doesn't strike me as that kind of player. But yeah, Wilfield subbed again. Had a so-so game, had a really nice quick hands to Jacob Goodstandy, who kicked his first goal in North colours, which was fantastic. Wilfield also tackled well. He had 6 of them, which was second highest for us, I think, behind LDU. But it's hard to find minutes for a midfielder that's getting 10 touches from 3 quarters of footy. It's not enough. And part of that is that we only have so many midfield minutes to share around, but part of it is that he's just not quite able to capitalise on the minutes that he is getting. I picked him to have a big year, so I still think there's going to be opportunities for him, but Yeah, it's a question mark for me, particularly when Georgie Wardlaw is fit. It's hard to see Wilfield fitting in, and even then, I think we're possibly playing one too many midfielders. Maybe it just means that Parker and Simpkins spend a little less time in the middle, but I mean, Parker has been super important in the middle. I don't think you want to completely shut him out of there, and we won't be, to be clear, absolutely. But it's just, you can't find minutes for everyone. Maybe it's Shees that goes forward a little bit more, because we know that he is a fantastic forward player. It looked to me like Wilfield tried to stop Clayton Oliver at times, but he certainly wasn't having an impact in that way. Oliver had 36 disposals and was probably he was Melbourne's best midfielder. You could probably mount an argument that he was their best player as well. So, look, it's just one to watch for me, because I don't think our midfield setup is quite right yet. We obviously had an amazing last quarter when Wilfield went off and was subbed. I'm not saying that those two things are related at all. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that we're probably not quite getting enough out of the amount of midfielders that we're playing. So that's one to watch for me, when Wardlaw is back, or even Zane Dersma is someone that we're going to want to get some minutes into this year, and maybe some of them come through the midfield. I guess that's just a question mark that I have right now, is how are we going to fit all these midfielders effectively into the team? And I guess realistically the answer is we're not. But, I guess, again, the question is, well, what are we going to do about it? So it's a great problem to have. Our midfielders were great, and Wilfield didn't have a bad game, but it's similar to last year. He doesn't quite have enough of an impact around the footy. And accumulate quite enough for to justify selection, I guess, is the thing. You'd maybe would prefer another option there that could play either forward or defence, whereas, Wilfield is just a mid. You can chuck him in the forward pocket for short periods, but he's not going to be a damaging small forward. So that is one to watch. And last segment here, around Arden Street, there is a couple of news pieces to talk about here. The VFL has started, and we actually had a draw, a 76 apiece draw against Casey, also on Sunday morning. So plenty of AFL listed players playing there. Fisher had 40 touches, so certainly putting his hand up. Whitlock, a great game, 20 disposals, 9 marks, and then from there, there's some of the other players that are in contention. Hardeman, Ford, Maley, Dersma all played and had some impact. It's, no one's going to be breaking into this side short of an injury, you would think, for next week. Griffin Logue, I don't expect to be fit for next week either, so you'd think we'd be pretty unchanged, maybe with the exception of a Dill Stevens or a Will Phillips. You could maybe swap out one of them for someone else, but for the most part, we'd be expecting a similar side for next week, but it's good to have options in the VFL now, and hopefully they're going to be in some good form. Hardeman had 18 touches, Ford, Maley and Dersma all kicked goals. So, a draw against Casey is a solid result, but you're probably in the VFL looking more at the individuals and the roles that they're playing and whether or not they're able to fill their roles successfully. So, that's the VFL. It's, as the season goes on, I think we'll be watching that a little bit more closely, but very early days at the moment. The interesting piece of news that's been floating around this week and has been pretty widely reported is that Braden Maynard from Collingwood, you probably know him best as the player that laid the bump on Angus Brayshaw that ended his career, unfortunately. Reportedly, we're offering him a 6-year deal at big money, which honestly is not surprising given the type of player he is. We offered some pretty nice coin to Nathan Broad of Richmond at the end of last season. It's clear that we're pretty keen for a experienced medium to small type defender that can actually play defensively as well as offensively. Right now we've got Caleb Daniel, but he's, certainly a more offensive defender than defensive. Yeah, interesting. I'd personally, look, the 6 years part, I guess, for Maynard is the bit that I probably balk at a little bit. I guess that's, the cost of potentially convincing him to come across. No talk at this stage as to whether or not he's keen at all. It's just talk that we're offering it. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to the Jack Darling deal where you probably have to give him a year or two longer than you want to in order to try and pry him out. I personally don't know if I see him as the type of player that we need, but obviously our list team does. I would think that someone like Goda or Miller Bergman or Riley Hardiman are the types of players that are going to fill a role like that in the years to come. But I don't know. I guess maybe our list management is concerned that we don't have a go-to alongside Archer to be that medium smaller defender type. So that's one to watch and to see how that plays out. It absolutely could just be that Maynard's trying to get his contract up at Collingwood and get some extra money. It's always hard to know why this kind of story might be leaking out, because to me you go, okay, well, who benefits from that? And Maynard definitely does if he can take the heat. But yeah, he's just not. I don't see it personally. I don't hate it. I just don't really see the need for a player of his type to be paying him big money and big tenure. So yeah, look, that's one to watch to see how that plays out. I guess if he remains unsigned, the more unsigned he is, or the longer he's unsigned, the more your ears might be pricked up for potential movement there. But yeah, it doesn't excite me is probably the best way to say it. I don't hate it, but it doesn't excite me at all, really. Looking ahead to next week, and we've got the Crows, they're in good form. They've belted the Saints in round one, then gone ahead and belted Essendon yesterday or the day before. So they are in some really strong form. They're sitting second on the ladder, but we've had 2.5 rounds of football. But it's a good test. We're playing in Adelaide. We haven't played well there the last several years, but we haven't played well anywhere the last several years, probably except Perth. We've had some pretty good moments in Perth. So a good test. Like I've mentioned earlier on the pod, I don't need us to win. Obviously, that'd be great, but what I don't want to see is a fall away and a complete lack of continuity from how we played this game. You'd expect us to go in relatively unchanged, so same squad. And, I just want to see us compete. We competed in the Western Bulldogs game. Like, we didn't get absolutely belted in that game. And I think the more you look at that, the better that result looks. The Dogs played very well against Collingwood, got absolutely stitched up by the umpires, I thought, in that game. And we're very unlucky not to beat the Pies. The Dogs, despite their injuries, are still looking pretty strong. Look, who knows? Maybe this season we are going to be more competitive, because the two games we've played so far are a relatively tight loss to the Dogs and a smashing win against the Dees. It's it's promising. It's promising. It's positive. This was a much nicer podcast record. I was much more looking forward to recording this one than I usually am, because it's so nice to be talking about things going well, to be putting it plainly. So yeah, that's next week. That is going to do it for this winning podcast. Yeah, just great to be on the winners list. To get that first win for the year is massive. Thinking back to last year, it was something that really weighed on us come the middle part of the year that we hadn't got across the line yet. That being said, we know from the year prior to that, getting a couple of wins early in the year and then going a long period without winning is just as bad. So we can't let this be a one-off. Even if it's not a win next week, we need to continue to see some positive play. And that's what I'll be looking for. So hope that you have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting the show. I really appreciate it. And I will speak to you at some stage after our round 3 game against the Crows. Fantastic win, and go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.